Hi, Marea.
Hi, Anne. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, nice to be with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. I just wanted to follow up in a Zoom chat with you because the last time we spoke, I just felt like I had so many questions for you. And then as we were talking, I was like, well, a lot of my patients and like the wider community might be interested. I know will be interested to know what you're up to and probably have some of the same questions that I have. So thank you for being here. And I want to dive right into your book. Can you tell me a little background about yourself and the name of your book and how you came to write it?
Sure. Yeah. I am first and foremost a midwife, an out of hospital midwife. I started doing birth work in 2011 and got licensed by the California Medical Board in 2015. So I started with like pregnancy and birth and postpartum care. And then in 2016, started doing, I got trained by some midwifery colleagues to do inseminations and started doing fertility care for the LGBTQ plus community, particularly. And as a queer person and a queer parent myself, I have three kids, currently 6, 3, and 13, almost 14. But yeah, just really passionate about supporting the LGBTQ community and other parents that aren't reflected in general society, and helping them access resources to grow their families. And so it was actually in 2020, during the shutdown, I had this idea to create like a queer family story anthology, just to create more like cultural representation of all of our families. And there was a midwife, another queer midwife on the East Coast. Their name's Ray Rachlin, who had the same idea to do the same thing. We connected. We were like, let's team up. And then that's how the idea was born. It was going to be just an anthology of people submitting the stories about how they grew their families. And then we realized like, oh, actually, we're both midwives providing that direct care to our community, and there hadn't been a book on queer family formation in 20 years. At the time, it was published last year in 2013, and in 2023, and there was another book that came out around that same time. So, but yeah, it had been so long, and the language had changed, and the resources and access had changed, and so we were, really honored to be the ones to write it and get a book deal to make it happen. And it's been a really cool experience.
Okay. So what's the name of your book?
It's called Baby Making for Everybody: Fertility and Family Building for LGBTQ plus and Solo Parents.
Awesome. And where can you find it? Where can we find it?
Yeah, you can find it anywhere. Hopefully it's at your local bookstore. It's on bookshop.org and Barnes and Nobles and Amazon, and it's anywhere, at your local library. If it isn't, you can request it. But yeah, maybe I can send you a link to include it under the notes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love that. Well, I have been reading it. I am not done yet. And I really think this might be part one of an interview because it is so rich, and your writing with Ray, it's so clear, it's passionate, it's informative, and like, you really lay out what kind of the arc of the book, like where you can find particular resources. And you put so much of yourself in there as well, which I know a lot of people appreciate and can relate to as well. I'd love to know a little bit more about how you are grouping solo parents with LGBTQ plus.
Yeah, we started, I think the idea for this anthology was really focused on LGBTQ plus families. But then as we were writing and thinking about like who needs this information the most, there are so many solo parents and prospective solo parents that I think more and more people, at least in our country and communities, are starting to make this choice of growing their family, whether or not they have a partner. And I'm like so excited about this. And I always say, like, you can have a baby, you have your whole life to find a partner, but you can have a baby in your own body, a very finite amount of time. And I think it's really amazing and empowering to make that choice. And we wanted to include folks who maybe don't identify as queer, but are growing their families in a creative and non-traditional way. So making space for those folks. And it's really sweet. I started last year, right before the book was published, I started an online community for queer folks and solo parents, and really anyone who has ever felt different throughout the trying to conceive time and pregnancy and postpartum and parenting. And we have a really solid contingency of solo parents in there who are at different stages of thinking about it, or had babies a few months ago, or somewhere in that process. And I'm just really passionate about bringing folks together, because it can be a lot, it can feel really isolating, and it's really makes such a difference to not be alone in this process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I mean, definitely your book is a work of activism too, right?
Right, totally. And we really wanted, one thing that I'm really passionate about as an out-of-hospital provider is like demystifying healthcare and making information about our bodies, which is often kind of hidden from us, a lot more accessible. And so we really tried to make it not like a super dense research paper, although we researched a ton to write it. We really wanted to make it like very digestible and accessible and personal, because that's like, it's such a human thing to grow our families, to decide that we want to be parents. And so we wanted to lead with that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so could you talk a little bit about some of the, I don't know, unique situations, challenges, benefits queer folks and solo parents to be might find themselves in this fertility journey?
Sure. Yeah. There's so much, and I'll start with one of the benefits that we start the book with, which is that although it's challenging to have to bring so much thought and intention and planning into this process when you are not in a relationship that contains all of the gametes that you need to create a pregnancy, it also, I think, the flip side of that is it can be a gift and a wonderful thing to need to decide and put so much intention into this choice of growing your family. I think it's really awesome for children to know that like they were brought into this world with so much foresight and intention. And I think that's like a really wonderful thing that our families bring into the world. And there are a lot of challenges, choosing a sperm donor and deciding whether or not that's going to be someone in your community, or you're going to get sperm from a bank, and making all of the choices around those decisions, and then the different types of insemination options, and understanding your personal preferences and also the statistics around it and your budget, and like making that choice of how you are going to start the pregnancy, the trying to conceive journey. It's a lot to sort through. There's a lot of information to sort through. Fertility clinics it's an industry that arose out of the need to treat infertile heterosexual couples. So they're not primarily focused on supporting people in our community who need access to some fertility treatments, but not necessarily for the same reasons that most of their clientele are accessing their services. And so, yeah, there's challenges in finding affirming providers and just getting access to the information that makes sense for you and for your unique picture. And so one of the things I'm starting to do is do online coaching for folks to excuse me, to help literally help them walk through this process of
Yep.
figuring out your donor priorities, how to make that choice, you know, whether or not you want to do fertility testing, what kinds, do you want to work with a midwife, or do you want, you know, does it make sense to consider IVF first and foremost, or what are your values as far as being as you know, outside of the medical system as possible, and really helping folks like walk through this process, because not only is it a lot to figure out, it also brings up a lot of emotions, and can be hard, you know, for folks in their relationships, and the emotional roller coaster of the trying to conceive and getting the timing right, and then the 2-week wait, and figuring out kind of how to take care of yourself in that process.
Yeah.
Is also, it's a big spiritual undertaking to go through the family building process.
100%, 100%.
Wow.
You know, one of the things that I see a lot in my clinic right now as an acupuncturist, I see more hopeful solo parents. And I have hopeful solo parents and queer couples trying to conceive. And at least in my practice, what I see is that the trying to conceive starts in the IVF setting. And, you know, when we walk through all the steps, and, you know, some of the challenges I see is there's going to be one insemination per cycle, and there's a lot of pressure on getting the timing right. But a lot of my patients feel like they're the ones that are tracking and paying attention to all the subtleties of the timing more than the clinic is. And I'm just really would love to know, because you offer home inseminations, how does that process look if we took the insemination out of the fertility clinic, out of the hospital type setting? You know, tell me what you provide.
Yeah, it's a great question. And so statistically, when you look at all of the data, your chance of conceiving, if you don't have any fertility issues, your chance of conceiving with or without medication via IUI is the same. When you add medications, it slightly increases the risk of twins a tiny bit, but otherwise it's the same. And a challenge is not necessarily knowing if you are someone who is on that infertility spectrum. So we don't always know, because of our relationship status, if we qualify for like actual medical infertility treatments. So that's one of the challenges, and that like the data isn't really built for our families. And that's one of the reasons that, you know, I mean, part of what I do in the initial screening process with my clients is getting a sense of menstrual cycle, like how regular it is, then ovulation signs, and working with folks on really helping them understand their ovulation signs, and if they are someone with regular ovulation and a desire to like be their own driver in the process, then they're a great candidate for home IUI. There are some people whose cycles are more irregular, maybe with a history of PCOS or endometriosis, or a feeling of like, I don't really want to be the one keeping track. Like, I would rather have a fertility doctor administering these medications and making that decision on when to do the insemination. There's personal preference in this as well. You know, those are the folks that will be best served in a fertility clinic. But, you know, for the people that are really connected to their bodies and there are fertility signs and like wanting to maintain that connection in a less clinical setting, it makes so much sense from a statistical standpoint, and also from a spiritual standpoint and experiential standpoint, to go out of the hospital. And so the IUI procedure itself is the exact same. You know, we use the same sterile catheter, and we use a speculum, and, you know, I'll usually set up on people's beds and put some pillows under their bed, and they want candles or music, and make it kind of a cozy, less clinical environment. And the IUI itself takes a minute or so. It's a pretty simple medical procedure, but yeah, the kind of ethos around it, and then the timing process is different, because we're working together following the signs of your body for the insemination timing, versus allowing that medication and that HCG trigger shot to guide to guide the timing. And so it's really just it's a different approach, and there are people that are great candidates for that, and then there are people that are great candidates for the medical one. And I think just helping people understand that they have these two different options.
They have options. Yeah, I think that's right. That's the takeaway. It's what are the options? And so, can we talk about frozen sperm?
Yeah.
As I'm still thinking, at least about my patients who they have their frozen sperm donor that's already at their IVF clinic, and they're really not handling it right. What happens in a home IUI setting with frozen sperm? How do you get it? Where do you store it? All of that. And where does is there an option for fresh sperm in that setting as well?
Yeah, so when people are planning home IUI, they get the sperm shipped to their home from the sperm bank, and it comes in a big nitrogen tank, and the tanks usually last for about a week. So I encourage people to plan for it to arrive about 3 or 4 days before they expect to ovulate. And then usually I'm the one, I usually just tell them, put it in your corner. Don't worry, it comes in with this big box with FedEx, and then I show folks how to just very carefully remove it and take it out. And it's a teeny tiny vial of sperm that comes in this huge tank. But it's pretty straightforward. And, I'm registered with basically all of the fertility clinics in the US, and they ship it, and it's no big deal. And then, as far as fresh sperm, I do work with folks who have known donors who are using fresh sperm to conceive. And there's some different timing considerations sometimes, depending on how close by the donor is, and if it's an option to do multiple inseminations during a cycle. But I do wash sperm. So before doing an IUI, the sperm needs to be washed and processed. So basically that means that the sperm itself, the sperm cells need to be separated from the seminal fluid, which has mucus and sperm food and all these other things that protect the sperm from the acidity of the vagina and help them live for longer. So we want to actually separate the sperm. We mix it with a special sperm wash, because you can't put unwashed semen directly into the uterus. And so it's a really, really high quantity of sperm. And we just, I like to say that they hitch a ride. They don't have to use their energy to get through the cervix and into the uterus. They can just go right there and be right by the fallopian tubes. Not all midwives do sperm washing, and it depends where you live, who is available to do these at-home inseminations. But one thing I'm working on is collecting, a living resource of these IUI providers all over the country, and just helping folks find people to work with.
Awesome. I love it. And then I think you've mentioned in conversation, and I forget if it's in your book or not, you've talked about doing multiple inseminations per cycle in certain situations.
Yeah, I think so statistically doing 2 inseminations per cycle doesn't double your chances of conceiving. And so for folks who are paying $1,500, or the cost of sperm since COVID has really risen, and now sometimes folks are paying $2,000 a vial for sperm. And so just from a cost benefit analysis, it's not necessarily recommended to do 2 inseminations per cycle. For folks who have a known donor, and aren't paying for sperm, I do recommend, when the donor lives close by you, doing like a fresh at home insemination yourself 48 hours before you plan to ovulate, and then giving the donor 48 hours to rebuild their sperm supply, and then doing insemination right or during that ovulation time, I think is really awesome for folks who have that privilege of having a local known donor. And I've had clients decide to do two, and the benefit of doing two is we can cover a wider window. So when sperm has been processed and frozen, it doesn't live for as long as fresh sperm. So that's why getting the timing right is so essential. And so when it is an option for folks to do multiple inseminations, it is great to just be able to cover a wider window, especially if the signs are a little bit more ambiguous. So it is an option, and can be a great thing to do. And I don't necessarily recommend it just really because of the cost.
So can you back up a minute? Did you say $2,000 for a vial of sperm?
Yes, that is a common price now that people are paying for sperm from a bank, which is wild. And pre-pandemic, it was ranging from $900 to $1,200 per vial, which is still very expensive, but compared to $2,000, it's much less.
And what does the pandemic have to do with that price jump, do you think?
I don't, it's not my area of expertise, so I can't speak to it with like utmost confidence, but my sense is, during the pandemic, they weren't accepting new donations. People didn't understand exactly like how COVID affected that. I also think COVID and also pollution in this moment in history, like we are experiencing higher rates of infertility. Sperm banks have really high standards when it comes to their donors. So maybe there are fewer people that actually qualify. And then also I know there's been like supply chain issues, so I don't know if that has something to do with it.
Supply chain issues. Oh my gosh, in every aspect of our
society. I know. Yeah.
But that, I'm just sitting with the $2,000 a vial and just feeling the pressure that someone might feel to get everything right for,
totally.
A cycle, right? Yeah. So
it's a lot. It's a lot of pressure. And I am seeing in my online community more folks, move towards the higher intervention things like IVF sooner if they can, if it's an option, if they have insurance coverage, or it's a tricky thing to decide, if you've put a chunk of money aside for this fertility journey and you could spend that on 6 months of IUI and the cost of sperm or one IVF cycle. Statistically, you have depending on your age and other fertility factors, about 30 to 50% chance of success with IVF versus about 18 or so % chance with each IUI. And so it's a tricky thing, that decision-making process is complex. I do have some clients who have insurance coverage and their coverage actually pays for their sperm, pays for 3 to 6 IUIs and 2 IVF cycles. Like there are some insurance add-ons that I think are becoming slightly more popular with large companies. And, it's amazing when people get some support with that. But, I do see this as a reproductive justice issue of folks just not having the access to really having a good shot at growing their families because of the financial barriers.
Absolutely. And have you found the clinics in Mexico, for example, to be LGBT, DQ plus friendly? What do you think?
I don't know anything about, I know that people with medical tourism try to, find different options. So I can't really speak to clinics outside of the US. I know that there is a clinic in Ithaca, New York, called CNY Fertility that offers $5,000 IVF cycles. And packages for using donor eggs. And that I've had lots of people realize that the cost of flying there and renting an Airbnb for 6 weeks and doing their fertility treatments there makes more sense than doing it through Kaiser or wherever they are.
Yep.
So, you know, there are some creative things that people do. And I've heard good things about CNY fertility.
Wonderful. Yep. I have some patients going there as well.
Yeah.
And can you share with us a little bit about like your own journey trying to conceive and getting pregnant? And you mentioned early on in your book having a miscarriage, and you shared about that.
I conceived. I'm a non-gestational parent to my 2 older kids, and I conceived our youngest with frozen known donor sperm. So there is a way when you have a known donor to have them donate to a bank and then use that sperm. And I had a very early miscarriage, and it's classified as a chemical pregnancy. And you know, I'd already been a midwife for I think almost 10 years at the point when I started my conception process, and had been, you know, in the process of writing this book and caring for folks during this time of life. But it surprised me how intense it was to go through this experience in my own body, to not be entirely sure when this ideal insemination time was, even though I literally lead workshops on fertility tracking and timing inseminations. It just felt so different doing it in my own body, and then having that experience of doing an insemination, getting a positive pregnancy test, being shocked and excited and telling people, and then a couple of days later starting to bleed, and just that huge the roller coaster of it all. Like it feels so different when you are going through it versus, you know, holding space for someone else's journey. And so it really I feel very grateful for the privilege of getting to experience this in my own body. And then, you know, I was lucky to get pregnant on my next insemination. And I do feel like having these experiences has helped me really understand the process in a different way. And still, you know, as someone, I didn't have fertility issues in growing my family. And there are many things that you know, our life experience teaches us, and then our life experience doesn't teach us. But then, you know, we work with folks through this process. And one thing I'm just really seeing over and over is how isolating and hard this process can be, just really on an emotional level. And just feel really excited about bringing folks together during this time.
Awesome. So tell me and tell the audience more about Pregnant Together.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Pregnant Together, and I'm just so excited about it. It's this just turned 1. We just had our 1-year-old birthday, and
happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an online community for queer folks, solo parents, and anyone who's ever felt not included by this, you know, kind of dominant cultural narrative about what families should be. And we have people in there who are planning to start growing their families within the next year or 2. We have a lot of people in the active trying to conceive process, folks who are pregnant and postpartum and parenting. And we do monthly support groups. So we have a monthly group for trying to conceive. We have a monthly group for pregnant people, for non-gestational parents, which, you know, for folks in a queer relationship, the non-gestational parent often gets left out of this trying to conceive experience because there's so much focus on the person who's trying to get pregnant's body. And so I'm really excited about creating that space for non-gestational parents. We have solo parents, we have people of the global majority, so BIPOC folks and mixed race people, and just really building community with folks who need and deserve to be connected during this time. And then so many recorded resources. And I do once a month webinars with different experts throughout this stage, and lead workshops on choosing a donor and timing inseminations. I'm about to do one on known donor relationships, which I'm excited about. And just, yeah, it's so fun. It's so fun to bring folks together and just see them connecting around these very, very salient and emotional experiences, and getting to just like be seen and connected during that time.
Wonderful. And I see that you have some workshops coming up. Are those only through, like, do you provide, membership only content, or do you have some content that's open to everybody?
Yeah, so the workshops, you can buy tickets to, anybody can. Everything is included if you're a member. So there's a monthly membership price of $20, or you can buy an annual fee that's discounted, and then everything is included. I often also do some free webinars that are open to the public. So if you go on my website, pregnanttogether.com, you'll see a list of the upcoming events. And yeah, there's also, you can buy recordings to the workshops on the website. So there are ways to access the information without joining the community. But I would say like the main value of the community is just getting to actually be in connection with these other folks. And so, yeah, just kind of building those relationships is awesome. But yes, I think I'm doing a how to choose a sperm donor workshop in a couple of weeks, and then the known donor relationships in April. And we've got a lactation webinar coming up, and lots of cool stuff going on.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I mean, it is clear to me, as a provider reading your book, I mean, I'm getting so much out of it as well. And so clear that your online platform is so needed. The guidance is in the community, is really awesome. And then what are you doing locally in Santa Cruz area?
Yeah, locally. So I work with folks one-on-one, doing home IUI. I have a very, very small home birth free practice right now. So selectively taking a few clients here and there, but mostly focusing on the IUI care, and then also doing the trying to conceive and family building coaching. So even folks who know that they want to work with a fertility clinic, or to do medicated IUIs or IVF, like I'm still working with folks to help them along that process. And it's all HSA eligible, including Pregnant Together. You can pay for it with an HSA account.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So you're doing private consulting as well then, for people trying to conceive.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really great to know about.
Yeah, I'm doing, you can book a 1-hour consultation, or I have a 6-month coaching package where I will like just hold your hand and walk you through every stage, for your unique family building journey. And it's folks are it's nice to have the accountability. It's nice to not feel like so overwhelmed by all of these decisions. And so yeah, it's good. Yeah.
So you shared where we can find your book, and Pregnant Together. Is anywhere else a best way to get in touch with you, Marea?
So pregnanttogether.com is a great way to get in touch with me. You can sign up for my mailing list. My email's on there. It's just Marea@pregnanttogether.com. You can, if you're local, restoremidwifery.com is my local midwifery website, so you can contact me that way. And then I'm also on Instagram at pregnanttogether.community.
Wonderful. Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Anne. That was fun.